On March 24, 2015 at 10:41 a.m., in the remote French Alps, Germanwings Flight 9525 slammed into a mountainside at over 400 miles per hour, killing everyone on board. This was no accident. For 8 terrifying minutes, the Airbus A320 had been in a deliberate, controlled descent, set by the co-pilot himself, while the captain was locked out of the cockpit. All 150 people, 144 passengers and 6 crew, lost their lives in what investigators would later confirm was a murder-suicide. What drove one young pilot to take 149 others with him remains one of aviation's darkest mysteries. Germanwings Flight 9525 had taken off from Barcelona El Prat Airport just after 10 a.m. local time, bound for Düsseldorf, Germany. The Airbus A320 was carrying mostly German and Spanish passengers, including 16 schoolchildren and 2 teachers from Holton am See on a class exchange trip. Among them were 2 acclaimed opera singers, bass baritone Oleg Bryjak and contralto Maria Radner, who was traveling with her husband and infant son, as well as families, business travelers, and holidaymakers. In the cockpit were 2 experienced pilots, 34-year-old Captain Patrick Sondenheimer with over 6,000 flight hours and 27-year-old First Officer Andreas Lubitz, who had joined Germanwings in 2013 and logged around 630 hours. Before takeoff, the captain mentioned he hadn't had time to use the bathroom in Barcelona. Lubitz replied calmly that he could go anytime. The flight was smooth and uneventful as the plane climbed to its cruising altitude of 38,000 feet. Passengers chatted, children looked out the windows, and the cabin crew served refreshments. Everything appeared perfectly normal until it was. Most people assume pilots are rigorously screened for mental health, but Andreas Lubitz's story shows how easily cracks can be hidden. Lubitz had suffered from severe depression since at least 2008. He had interrupted his flight training for months, been treated for suicidal tendencies, and seen dozens of doctors over the years. He was prescribed antidepressants, including citalopram and mirtazapine, and sleeping medication. Just 2 weeks before the crash, a general practitioner diagnosed possible psychotic symptoms and recommended immediate psychiatric hospitalization. Yet Lubitz never fully disclosed the extent of his condition to Germanwings or Lufthansa. Medical confidentiality laws, combined with his own determination to fly, allowed him to keep flying despite being declared unfit for work by at least one doctor. He had consulted more than 40 medical professionals in the preceding years, but fear of losing his pilot license and the financial pressure of being grounded kept him silent. Experts later noted that pilots with serious mental illness can hide symptoms out of career concerns, a dangerous pressure that Lubitz ultimately could not escape. There have been clear red flags. During his initial Lufthansa training in 2008, Lubitz had taken a long medical leave for depression and was even assessed as having suicidal tendencies. In the days leading up to March 24, he had researched suicide methods and cockpit security systems on his tablet. He tore up sick notes, including one issued for the very day of the crash. Multiple doctors knew he was unwell, yet none were legally required or able to alert the airline due to strict medical privacy rules in Germany. Germanwings and Lufthansa later admitted that while they had some information about his past medical leave, they had no idea of the severity of his current state. On the morning of the flight, Lubitz appeared calm and professional to his colleagues. Everyone assumed he was fit to fly. At approximately 10:27 a.m., the plane leveled off at 38,000 feet. The captain asked Lubitz to prepare for landing, then left the cockpit to use the bathroom. The reinforced cockpit door clicked shut and locked automatically behind him. Moments later, Lubitz adjusted his seat, then calmly changed the autopilot setting from 38,000 feet to just 100 feet and selected a rapid descent rate. When the captain returned and realized what was happening, he began banging on the door, shouting, "For God's sake! Open the door, and open the damn door." Air traffic control in Marseille tried repeatedly to contact the flight on multiple frequencies, but received no response. Inside the cockpit, Lubitz said nothing. His breathing remained steady and calm throughout the descent. He made small inputs on the side stick and repeatedly adjusted the selected airspeed upward. For 8 long minutes, the plane descended at high speed toward the mountains. Passengers and crew could be heard screaming in the final seconds as the terrain proximity warning sounded and the rocky slope rushed up. At 10:41:05 a.m., the aircraft slammed into the mountainside at 430 mph in the remote commune of Prads-Haut-Blayen. The impact was so violent that the plane disintegrated instantly, scattering debris over a wide area. The first rescue helicopters arrived within about 30 minutes. High mountain gendarmerie officers, including Jean-Sébastien Bode, were winched down to the crash site at around 11:07 a.m. They found a surreal and devastating scene. The largest piece of wreckage was no bigger than a car. Human remains and personal items were strewn across a steep, rocky slope covering several acres. There were no survivors. The difficult terrain, high altitude, and scattered debris made recovery operations extremely challenging. Up to 17 helicopters were eventually involved, and teams worked for days to collect remains for identification. The psychological toll on the first responders was immense as they realized the full horror of what had happened. The French Bureau d'Enquêtes et d'Analyses, BEA, recovered both black boxes within days. The cockpit voice recorder and flight data left no doubt. This was a deliberate act by the co-pilot. Lubitz had planned it, locking the captain out and setting the aircraft on a controlled descent while remaining conscious and calm until the end. Toxicology confirmed the presence of antidepressants and other medications in his system. In the aftermath, the aviation world was forced to confront uncomfortable truths about mental health and pilot privacy. Germanwings, part of Lufthansa, faced massive lawsuits from victims' families. The tragedy triggered immediate safety changes across Europe and beyond. The introduction of the 2-person rule in the cockpit, requiring a second crew member whenever one pilot leaves. Stronger psychological evaluations for pilots, encouragement of peer support programs like Mayday, and clearer guidelines on when medical confidentiality must yield to public safety. The BEA issued multiple recommendations to improve mental health screening, reduce the stigma of seeking help, and prevent similar hidden risks in high-responsibility roles. Germanwings Flight 9525 became the benchmark that still influences modern aviation mental health protocols today. The 150 families left behind faced a pain that words can barely describe. Mothers and fathers who had sent their children off on what should have been a joyful school trip now faced empty bedrooms and silent dinner tables. Husbands and wives lost their life partners in an instant. Young children were suddenly left without a parent to hold them. Entire communities, like the small German town of Holten am See, were plunged into collective grief as they mourned not just individuals, but the bright futures that were stolen that day. Families waited in agony for days and weeks to receive confirmation, some clinging to the faintest hope that a miracle might happen. Even years later, many still struggle with the unbearable question of why their loved ones, who had simply boarded a routine flight home, never made it back. Germanwings Flight 9525 showed us that even the most highly trained professionals can carry invisible burdens too heavy to bear alone. The moment we treat mental health as something that must stay hidden in high-stakes jobs like aviation, we are already playing a dangerous game with hundreds of lives. The only real protection is to respect the warning signs, break the stigma, and ensure that no one is ever left to struggle in silence at 38,000 feet.